Hello everyone. Welcome to this course on the hands-on practice of fixed assets in Kingdee AI Suite. In this course, we'll walk through the main process flows and operations of this application. First, let's take a look at the overall process flow. It can be divided into 6 steps. We start by maintaining basic data, such as asset categories and storage locations. Next, we set the enabled period. Once the enabled period is set, we can import and initialize asset cards. After the initial data is maintained and confirmed, we complete initialization. From there, we move into daily operations, including asset card creation, asset changes, and asset clearing. At the end of each period, we run depreciation. Based on the voucher templates, we then post accounting entries for asset depreciation and related documents. After all transactions for the period are completed correctly, we can close the period and move on to the next one. Now that we have a preliminary understanding of the business process flow, let's go step by step and look at the specific functions and operations in the system. First, let's look at the initialization guide. It is designed to help users complete initialization faster. Initialization is performed by owner organization for both setting and accounting. The process is divided into 6 steps. In step 1, we review key concepts and product architecture with links to Kingdee community for further learning. In step 2, we configure commonly used basic data in this application, such as asset categories and storage locations. In step 3, we configure fixed asset parameters. In step 4, we set the enabled period to activate this application. In step 5, we enter initialized asset cards. In step 6, we complete the initialization process. Next, let's look at the basic data in this application. First, we have asset categories. Currently, 7 categories are predefined, and customers can also create custom asset categories as needed. When we add a new asset category, there is a UOM field. If UOM is configured for the asset category, then when we add an asset card and select this category, the card will automatically carry the UOM from the asset category. Card code prefix is a code rule for asset cards by category. In this system, the predefined asset card code rules are differentiated by card code prefix of each asset category, and users can modify it if needed. Storage location is used to record where fixed assets are stored. The system doesn't provide predefined data, so customers need to add locations manually. The tree shows the storage location groups. If a customer has many storage locations, they can manage them by groups. The usage status field has common options predefined in the system, and users can also create custom options. This field has 2 options. The first is depreciate. By default, it's not enabled. If enabled, assets in this status will be included in depreciation. For example, assets that are temporarily out of use due to seasonal reasons or major repairs are excluded from depreciation. The second option is default, which is used to set the default usage status. Once this is set, when a card is created, the card will automatically use the default usage status. The system currently provides predefined options for addition, reduction method, and supports customization. Addition, reduction type has 2 options, increase and decrease. Addition, reduction type for new cards can only be set to increase, while that for asset clearing can only be set to decrease. Addition, reduction method has a default option. When it is enabled, the system automatically applies this method to new cards. The system provides 7 predefined depreciation methods: straight line, double declining balance method, sum of the year's digits method, units of production method, one-time depreciation method, declining balance method after adjustment in Vietnam standards, and depreciation by day in Thailand standards. In addition, the system now supports 2 types of custom depreciation methods: fixed depreciation rate and custom depreciation formula. When we select fixed depreciation rate, the system uses the rates we configure for each period to calculate the depreciation amount. When we select custom depreciation formula, we can configure specific formulas, including a static formula and a dynamic formula. A warehouse keeper is responsible for acknowledgement and confirmation of returned assets. Therefore, before we create an asset return document for my asset, we first need to configure the warehouse keeper for the corresponding asset organization. The system supports setting warehouse keepers by asset organization and also supports further assignment by asset category or storage location. Next, let's look at fixed asset initialization. We'll start with FA-enabled period settings. When the accounting system is saved, the system automatically generates data of FA-enabled period settings based on child organizations and the applicable accounting policies. In other words, the system supports parallel accounting for the same owner organization under multiple accounting policies. On the FA-enabled period settings page, we select the corresponding owner organization and accounting policy, and then click Enable. After enabling, if the start period needs to be adjusted, we can perform a disable operation. After completing settings on the FA-enabled period settings page, we can proceed to maintain the asset card data. When we configure parameters on the asset card page, the value of starting date must be earlier than that of enabled period. For example, if enabled period for Kingdee Sales Company is set to FP11 FY2025, then value of starting date must be on or before the 31st of October 2025. By default, the user department on the asset card can only be selected from departments assigned to the business unit. For example, if the production department has been assigned to Kingdee Sales Company, then the production department becomes available for selection as the user department on the card. In addition, we have the department sharing parameter. If this is enabled, the user department on the card can be selected from all administrative organizations. Customers can decide whether to enable it based on their actual business needs. If this parameter is not enabled, we first need to configure parameters on the department assignment to business unit page and assign the user department scope for each owner organization. There is also an asset in warehouse field on the asset card. It refers to an asset managed by a warehouse keeper. It can later be allocated to a recipient through the asset request flow in My Asset. If asset in warehouse is not enabled, the warehouse keeper will not be able to allocate the asset to a recipient. On the Financial Information tab of the Asset Card page, the value of recording date must be earlier than that of enabled period. For example, if enabled period is set to FP11, the value of recording date must be on or before October 31. In addition, the value of starting date on the Asset Card page must be on or before the value of recording date. On the Asset Card page, depreciation method is set to static formula calculation by default. To switch to a dynamic algorithm, click Change to Dynamic Algorithm. After finishing data configuration on the Asset Card page, we can proceed to End Initialization. When we click End Initialization on the End Fixed Asset Initialization page, the system checks if all initial asset cards have been approved. If any initial asset card remains unapproved, initialization cannot be ended. After initialization is ended, if changes are needed to the asset card data, we can first withdraw initialization and then make the modifications. Purchase to FA is used to convert purchased assets into fixed assets. When we click Select Document from the menu, the dialog box is displayed. We can set Select Document to Receipt Registration Notice or Miscellaneous Issue. After asset purchasing is completed, the system allows assets to be converted into fixed assets, either directly from a receipt registration notice or from a miscellaneous issue document after receipt. On the Purchase to FA page, we can set card creation method for conversion to asset cards. Options for card creation method include per document body entry line, split by quantity, and create cards by whole documents. For example, a purchase to fixed asset document contains 2 entry lines, and each line has 2 entries. When we select Split by Quantity, the system generates 4 asset cards, each with a quantity of 1. When we select Per Document Body Entry Line, the system generates 2 asset cards, 1 for each entry line, and each card has a quantity of 2. When we select Create Cards by Whole Documents, the system generates 1 asset card. The physical object information is taken from primary information line, and the financial amount is the total of all entry lines. A CIP to FA document is used to record all costs incurred during a construction in progress CIP project and to perform the conversion to fixed assets. Currently, the system does not support process management of CIP projects. The system supports the generation of a CIP to FA document through conversion from the project cost carry-forward document. We can manually create a CIP to FA document. On the CIP to FA page, we can set transaction type to new or change. When a CIP project has been completed and needs to be converted into fixed assets, we select new. When a project has already been completed and converted into fixed assets, but the original value of the converted asset needs to be adjusted, we select change and select the asset card already converted. For an approved new CIP to FA document, we can set convert to asset card to complete the CIP to FA conversion. For an approved CIP to FA document after change, we can set convert to asset change to modify the original value of the fixed asset. The asset card and initialize asset card page provide roughly the same functions. The only difference is the recording date parameter. On the asset card page, this parameter must be set to a value later than or on the first day of the value specified for current period. For asset cards recorded late, for example, when recording date is set to FP11 and starting date is set to FP9, if the values of number of current depreciated periods and accumulated depreciation are both 0 at the time of recording, the system will automatically calculate catch-up depreciation for the periods from the usage date to the recording date and include it in the depreciation amount of the current period. Currently, we can specify only one value for user department on the asset card and initialize asset card page. For assets used by multiple departments, or when depreciation expenses need to be allocated across multiple departments, projects, or other dimensions, we need to configure depreciation allocation settings. On the asset card or initialize asset card page, we select data and click allocation settings. The batch add depreciation allocation settings page is displayed. Set depreciation, allocation, dimension, and allocation percentage as required. And then click Save, Submit, Approve. During subsequent depreciation runs, if a card does not have depreciation allocation settings, the system will use the value of user department on the card by default. If depreciation allocation settings exist, the system will allocate depreciation according to the configuration data. On the asset change page, we can adjust data of asset cards. When creating an asset change order, we first select the items to change. When we modify parameters on the Physical Object Information tab, the modification takes effect in the current period. When parameters on the Financial Information tab are modified, the effect depends on the value of change impact type. If we select Prospective Application, the impact is determined by the asset policy under the accounting policy. If we select Current Period, depreciation is affected from the current period of change. If we select Next Period, depreciation is affected starting from the next period. If we set Change Impact Type to Retrospective Adjustment, the system automatically recalculates depreciation back to the recording date and includes the difference in depreciation of the current period. On the Clearing Request page, we can initiate a clearing request for scrapped or damaged assets. After an asset clearing request is approved, it is converted to an asset clearing document for clearing. The system supports both partial clearing and complete clearing. After complete clearing, the original value and other values on the asset card are retained. Only the transaction status of the asset card is set to voided. For partial clearing, if the quantity of asset cards is greater than 1, we can manually modify the quantity of asset cards to perform partial clearing. If the quantity of the asset card equals 1, we can manually modify the original value of the asset for partial clearing. On the Asset Clearing page, we have business date in the Clearing Asset Details section. This date represents the actual scrapping date of the asset. This field is applicable in scenarios where an asset is scrapped first and cleared later. For example, an asset may have been scrapped in September, but not sold during that period, so the clearing income could not be confirmed, and no clearing document was created at that time. In this case, we do not need to create an asset clearing document in FP9. Later, for example in FP11, once the asset is sold and the clearing income is confirmed, we can then create an asset clearing document and set its business date back to September. Then we have the clearing income expense detail section. It is used to record clearing income and clearing expenses. On the asset clearing page, we perform conversion to accounts receivable for processing of the clearing income. Asset impairment is used to process assets that require impairment provisions. Whether an asset can be impaired depends on the impairment policy defined in accounting policy is greater than asset policy. If we set the impairment policy to no impairment, the asset cannot be processed through this feature. If we set the impairment policy to recognize impairment, irreversible, we can recognize impairment. But reversal of impaired amounts is not allowed. If we set the impairment policy to recognize impairment, reversible, we can both recognize impairment and reverse previously recognized impairment amounts. To reverse impairment, we simply enter a negative amount in current period impairment. On the asset impairment page, we have depreciation impact date. It is set to the next period by default. If depreciation needs to be affected starting from the current period, we can modify it to the current period. On the asset split page, we can split an asset card into multiple asset cards. For example, a company may purchase a batch of assets and record them on a single asset card at the time of recording. Later, the asset card may need to be split into multiple asset cards for more refined management. When creating an asset split document, we first select the split card, then enter the splitting quantity, and select the split method and split type. Currently, the system supports two split methods, split by quantity and split by amount. For example, we have 2 cards to split, and we set the splitting quantity to 2. If we select split by quantity, each card after split will have a quantity of 1. If we select split by amount, the original asset value will be evenly allocated across the cards after split. For example, an asset with an original value of 10,000 will be split into 2 cards, each with an original value of 5,000. In addition to equal splitting, the system also supports proportional splitting. We click Split Proportionally. The split ratio setting dialog box is displayed. Set split ratio. The system then performs the split based on the configured ratio. The system provides 2 split types, keep the original card and do not keep the original card. When we select Keep the original card, after approval, the original card is retained, and N1 new cards are generated. When we select Do not keep the original card, after approval, the original card is voided, and N new cards are generated. On the Asset Consolidation document page, we can transfer the values of multiple asset cards into one existing asset card. For example, when accessories are purchased for a piece of equipment and separate asset cards are created for those accessories, we can transfer the values of the accessory cards into the equipment card. When creating a new asset consolidation document, we first set Transfer In Asset, and then we select the asset cards whose values will be transferred out in Transfer Out Asset Details. Multiple selections are supported. After the transfer out assets are selected, the system automatically updates the original value and accumulated depreciation from the transfer out assets into the corresponding fields of the transfer in asset. Once the asset consolidation is approved, the transfer out asset cards are automatically voided, and the values of the transfer in asset, such as original value and accumulated depreciation, are updated accordingly. Asset transfer refers to the transfer of assets between different organizations within the same group. To initiate an asset transfer, the transfer out organization first creates an asset transfer out document. In the Transfer Information section, we specify Transfer in Owner Organization and Transfer in Asset Organization. The system provides 2 transfer types, including Same Price Transfer and Varied Price Transfer. When we select Same Price Transfer, the asset is transferred based on the value on the transfer out asset card. Varied price transfer is selected when transfer-related expenses such as freight are incurred during the transfer. In this scenario, the transfer-related expenses are borne by the transfer-in organization. These expenses need to be recorded in the value of the transfer-in asset card. In this case, we select Varied Price Transfer and manually enter the assessed value. The assessed value will then be used as the original value of the asset card in the transfer-in organization. After the transfer out is approved, the system automatically generates an asset transfer-in document for the transfer-in organization. Once the asset transfer-in document is confirmed, the system automatically generates an asset clearing document for the transfer-out organization and an asset card for the transfer-in organization. For asset transferring across different legal entities, the system supports intercompany settlement, generating AR and AP settlement documents for processing of internal accounts receivables and accounts payables. Asset revaluation allows an enterprise to reevaluate and adjust asset values based on fair value. Under Chinese accounting standards, subsequent measurement using the revaluation model is not permitted, while international accounting standards allow assets to be revaluated based on fair value. On the revaluation rule page, we can define whether accumulated depreciation should be revaluated, whether the revaluation provision can be amortized, and whether scrapping is allowed. Before performing asset revaluation, we first need to configure the revaluation rule. If an enterprise revaluates assets according to international accounting standards, we select the corresponding accounting policy and select Allow for Revaluation. After the accounting policy is configured, we can create a new asset revaluation document to perform the revaluation. Once the accounting policy is selected, the system automatically brings in data of the revaluation rule associated with that accounting policy. We can modify the data. After selecting the asset cards to be revaluated, we set the revaluation rate and click Revaluation Calculation. The system automatically calculates the original value after revaluation, accumulated depreciation, and the revaluation provision amount based on the revaluation rule. Once the asset revaluation is approved, the system automatically generates an asset change order to update the original value and accumulated depreciation. If we select Amortization Revaluation Preparation when setting the revaluation rule, the revaluated provision amount can be amortized on a straight-line basis in subsequent periods. On the Revaluation Amortization page, we select Data and click Revaluation Amortization. After amortization is completed, the system automatically generates revaluation amortization details. For revaluation amortization in draft status, we can manually modify the revaluation amortization amount for the current period. After the revaluation amortization is approved, the system automatically updates the amortized revaluation provision and unamortized revaluation provision fields on the asset card. In Kingdee AI Suite, the system supports asset count through scanning. We can generate, design, and print asset barcode labels. To begin, we need to enable the asset barcode function. Go to the asset barcode enablement page, click Enable. The system does not support disabling this function after it is enabled. The system provides a predefined asset barcode rule. That is, the system generate barcode based on asset code plus SN. Custom barcode rules are not supported. After the asset barcode function is enabled, the system automatically generates asset barcode data according to the barcode rule when an asset card is approved. For asset cards that are already approved before enabling, we can select the records in the asset card list and click Generate Barcode to create barcode data. On the Print Templates for Asset Barcode page, we can modify the existing template or create new templates based on actual requirements. After configuring the print template, we can proceed to print barcode labels on the Asset Barcode printing page. The Barcode Track page displays all asset barcode records. We can view barcode, track logs, and generation records. Enterprises need to perform asset counts periodically. Before starting an asset count, we first create an asset count scheme to define the scope of the count. End date of account scheme is used to filter asset cards. The system selects asset cards whose starting date is earlier than or on the end date. We can set inventory mode to include asset quantity, user department, and storage location. After the asset count scheme is submitted and approved, we can click Generate Asset Count to generate an asset count sheet. The asset count sheet is generated. In the Count Details data section of the asset count page, we can set count quantity for counting. We can also scan asset barcodes by using a PDA for counting. If the user department of asset has changed during the counting process, we can set count change user department to the actual user department in the count details data section on the asset count page. After the asset count sheet is approved, the system automatically generates gain-loss documents based on the quantity variances. In addition, the system automatically generates an asset change order to update the user department on the asset card based on data of count change user department. On the gain-loss page, we can set convert to asset clearing for inventory loss processing and set this field to asset card for inventory gain processing. On the count report page, the system supports displaying the overall count progress, total book quantity, and gain-loss data by count scheme. If a single count scheme covers multiple organizations, we can view count results by asset organization. After all business transactions for the period are completed, we can perform depreciation accrual at period end. On the Depreciation Run page, select the required data and click Depreciation Run. After depreciation is completed, the system automatically generates an asset depreciation document. We can click Query Depreciation View Data about depreciation. The Depreciation Summary section displays the current period depreciation amount and the depreciation to be accrued for all assets. The Depreciation Details section displays depreciation allocation information for each asset, including the allocation dimension, allocation percentage, and allocated amount. The Depreciation Calculation Information section shows the calculation data and corresponding formulas used for each asset at the time depreciation is accrued. We can clearly see how the depreciation for the current period is calculated. To adjust the depreciation amount, we can manually enter the depreciation amount after adjustment for the current period. Any manually adjusted depreciation amounts are carried forward and will affect depreciation in later periods. The system provides 7 fixed asset reports to present enterprise asset data. The asset list page displays physical object information and financial information of each asset for every period. When we query asset cards, the system displays only approved and non-scrapped cards by default. If we want to query unapproved or scrapped, cleared cards, we can select these options manually. For cards with depreciation allocation settings, the asset list page also displays the corresponding depreciation allocation details. The depreciation page displays depreciation data for each asset by period. The depreciation page provides 2 display formats: display by detail document and display by summary. When we select display by detail document, the system displays depreciation data for each asset and each period, including beginning, current period, ending original values, and accumulated depreciation. When we select display by summary, we need to set aggregation dimension first. We can set this parameter to asset category, user department, usage status, storage location, or addition, reduction method. Click Query. The system automatically aggregates and displays the data by the specified dimension. In addition, if we do not want to display asset cards with 0 depreciation, we can select Exclude cards with 0 depreciation. The Asset Value Change page displays period-by-period changes in asset values, including original value and accumulated depreciation. It supports data summary by asset category. When we click Query, we can see original values of each period, accumulated depreciation, beginning balance of impairment provision, current period increases and decrease, and ending balance. We reconcile fixed assets with the general ledger using the Asset Value Change report. On the Depreciation Allocation page, we can query depreciation allocation details by period. Allocation dimensions can be displayed by name, code, or name and code. Here we can see each allocation dimension along with its corresponding allocated amount. The Change Process Record page shows the complete change history of each asset card from creation to full clearing. The Change Document Source column displays the source document for each change. We can quickly link to the document for detailed view. The Asset Addition Reduction Record page displays asset increases and decreases for each period. By default, transfer-related increases and decreases are not displayed. We can select transfer to include them. The depreciation projection page allows us to query projected depreciation for future periods. The forecasted depreciation column displays the total depreciation from the current period to the projection end period. It does not provide the depreciation amount of the projection end period alone. Forecasted year-to-date depreciation, accumulated depreciation, net value, number of current depreciated periods, and remaining usage periods are all updated based on the depreciation projection. After all fixed asset transactions for the current period are completed, we perform period end closing to move to the next period. The system provides a separate closing check function. We select an organization from the owner organization column and click Run Closing Check. The system automatically runs all checks. We can open the closing check result page to view all check items and their results. Once all checks pass, we can click Closing to complete the closing process. This concludes the introduction. Thank you.